we know you have Chad Surratt and Jeremiah Gimmel back at linebacker. What player do you think has a shot at being that third possible linebacker?
It's I only have 6 total that's on scholarship, Miss King. I got Kadri Jackson, Asante, as well as the 2 young boys that came in with West and Dre. So I don't know anything about how they're doing right now as far as the football part, because we didn't get a chance to go through spring with them. But I tell you what, I'm very encouraged with Asante as well as Kadri. Both of those guys they do the same thing as a Surratt and a Gimmel. Gimmel is super fast and super smart, and I think Kadri has that same attribute. And then Asante he is so fast. I mean, we think that Chaz is a really fast player, but Eugene, he gives us a dimension that we don't have on our football team at speed. So it'll be interesting to see, which one of those guys evolve. It would have been great to get him in the spring just to see who would have been the chance to step up. Last year we played with a lot of 3 linebackers with D. Ross on the field, and that kind of changed our football team when he came out. So we're going to experiment, especially on 3rd down with Eugene and Kadri, because both of those guys deserve to get some playing time this year.
Anything to follow with, Dan?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Andrew Jones, go ahead.
Hey, Coach, appreciate you coming on with us. Now that you've had a chance to see Mac
Anytime.
You got it?
Go ahead, Andrew.
Okay.
Say that one more time.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Okay. Now that you've had a chance to see Mac go through a full season and a full recruiting cycle, it's sort of a 2-part question here. What have you seen from him that is a lot different than what you experienced a long time ago as a player? And have there been a few moments where you've thought to yourself, hey, I remember that. I remember being on the other end of hearing that or receiving that back in the day?
Oh, good question. I'll tell you what, when I was at 18 and 19 years old, his message hasn't changed. And I tell you what, as a player and then being a coach, you never saw the side, when you was a player on how he interacted with the coaches. As a player, you knew that Mac had your best interest at heart, on and off the football field. And he always had that caring touch. Cared about you, with all parts of your life, cared about your parents. As this is my first time ever working with Coach as an adult, but he's been with me ever since I started coaching 20-something years ago. And then being with him and just seeing how structured and organized he is, and the vision, he has a vision on exactly what he wants to get done. It's truly like, if you ever got a head coaching job, I think the blueprint is exactly what he does. From the notes, and Jeremy will tell you that everything is really coordinated and organized. So it's not by accident that we're doing well in recruiting, as well as as his plan on getting the new facilities, the facilities part of it, then the crowd size of it, the new marketing. That's all Mac. Mac does a great job with that. That's the part I didn't see as a player, was on how he interacted with the organization of the team, and it's truly professional. I think ESPN, when he won a chance to work with ESPN, that gives you a chance to really get a chance to make you better as far as speaking. He was always a dynamic speaker and had a really charismatic. I think when he went to ESPN, and capturing the audience, how do you hold 10, 15 million people to not turn a channel? I think he's mastered that, because every time he speaks, the players, the coaches, the organization, everybody around the organization, we're all tuned in to everything he says. And it's always different, and he's always changing it up. But so to answer your question, as a player, I mean, players from 20-something years ago, they've always loved him. And as coaches now, you can really admire the way he leads and motivates the football team.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go to Sammy. Go ahead, Sammy. Hold on a second. Are you trying to unmute yourself?
All right. Yeah. Tommy, if I'm right, you were recruited Mac after one of those 1-10 seasons. I mean, he must have really did a great selling job for you. What was there a moment during your recruitment that, despite that 1-10, what Mac said was just impressed you so much you wanted to be part of all that?
Oh, no doubt. So you remember, I wasn't from the East Coast. I was from Arkansas. So my last 2 years of high school were in Northern Virginia. Back in those days, man, there wasn't a 247. There wasn't a Rivals Top 100. It wasn't any of that. I knew one thing. I knew when I came out of high school, they sent me from Arkansas to go live with my dad because I needed some discipline. And so I go from a 1.9 to like a 4.0 just by moving environments. Okay, so when I got to Northern Virginia to be with my dad, when the recruitment started, all I knew was this. I knew I wasn't ever going to go back to Arkansas. And the only person that actually was talking to me about life after football was Coach Brown. And all he kept telling me was, hey, when you get done with football, you'll always have a job. I'll always make phone calls for you. 20 years after you're done with football, you have a relationship with me for the rest of your life. And so with those coaches, and then when I came out of high school, coaches were telling me, okay, yeah, you go to the pros, you play 3 years, you leave. All they kept preaching was NFL. At that time, that was not the farthest thing from my mind. All I knew was I wanted to get a degree. I wanted to have a great job, and I did not want to go back and live in the South. And he was the one guy that sold my family from the get-go. It wasn't just about football. It was about life after the football element. And that's what stuck it out. My dad, when he left Matt, he said, I've never met anybody that's like that man. And I got a great feeling about him. He said, don't worry about the 1-10 record. You say, if you go to school there and you change your program, people always remember that. And so that was the one thing that stuck out about Coach Brown, was the fact that he had promised me and my family that I would get a degree. I knew I could play football, so that I wasn't worried about that. But the fact that he said, I'll take care of you for the rest of your life, that's what stuck in my mind. And when I talk to 18-year-olds today, I tell them the same thing. Not everybody gonna preach football to you, but not many. There'll be 2 or 3 people in your life that say they're gonna keep their word to you, especially when they're done and your football career is over with. And that was Coach Brown.
Anything to follow with, Sammy?
Yeah, I was just wondering, are there any similarities to the rebuild that you guys are going through now as to when you were a player? Because because you remember now we did back-to-back 1-10 seasons. They were right on top of each other, But the message never changed. He never, most times when somebody go 1-10, usually if you go 1-10 the second year, you're fired in college football today. But Matt never changed. You never knew he was stressed. You never knew he was under duress. You never felt the pressure. Most people, when they feel that second year of pressure on them, it kind of projects onto the players. But not one time was he ever erratic with the football players. I never remember him ever being out of his element. So for us, so same thing from last year. I never saw Coach out of his element. So as a player, I saw that, and here I am, 20-some years later as an adult, and here we are. We start off the season pretty good, then we have a little bumpy road, but his message never ever changed. And how did he fix it? We go from 1-10, and then the next year we went 6-4-1, then 7-4, then 9-3. So it was just the constant progress of the football team. So you're seeing the same thing again now. What he did do was kept bringing in better and better football players, and that's the cure-all. You keep bringing in better football players, your program is going to change. And then having that culture where the kids stay around and they keep promoting your program, that's the difference. So you see the recruiting has now changed. You see the better players that's on the board. Now we have to develop them so we can each week, or each year, build up on the progress that we made from the year before.
Greg Barnes, go ahead.
Hey, Tommy. By the end of
Hey, Rick.
you doing all right? But by the end of last year, Chaz Surratt and Jeremiah Gemmel were solid contributors to the defense. But this time last year, they were relative unknowns, especially Chaz, having been quarterback. What was your approach in coaching those guys up, knowing that you had limited options there in the middle, and trying to get them ready for that season opener?
Well, you don't have a draft, so it's what you got. and one thing about football, you just stay on the message. You know, you just I stayed consistent with them, and we just kept doing the same drills over and over and over and over again. What set both of those young men apart was how smart they are. I mean, extremely intelligent football players and high character football guys. So football is important to both of them, and they were smart and they were tough. All they needed to do was just the more experience they got, the better they were going to become. I saw that in both of them. You know, Chaz got a different kind of speed. He's big, he's fast, and he's super cerebral. That's what people don't understand. That Chaz, you tell him something one time, and that's it. And same thing with Jeremiah Gemmel. And so both those young guys gave us an element of speed that I know I didn't have when I was at Tennessee or at Auburn. They were both faster linebackers than the ones that I had. All they needed was experience and then just stay consistent with the messaging. So to watch them both grow, especially Chaz, if you remember the South Carolina game, just okay. But then by the end of the season, you know, he started to really build onto his image of who he was as a football player. I mean, now he's starting to talk to the safeties and talking to the D linemen on, you know, what to expect. So he's changed a lot as a football player, and that's what I did see, the fact that their care factor was really high. They loved the game, and their teammates respected them. And so for them to keep getting better and better each week, we never got down on them. We never yelled or berated the player. We kept encouraging them. And that's the way that when Coach Brown was with me and those years in the 90s, that's how I built as a player. He kept being positive with me. So as a result, that's my coaching style. Stay positive, keep the message going, and you just keep drilling it. And the fact that both those guys could run and they were smart, it wasn't by accident they turned into productive football players.
I agree.
Given that growth curve that they went through last year, kind of where's their next step? I mean, do you think you can put a lot more on them? Had you kind of pared back some just to kind of make it easier on them, or?
No, you can put with both those. I mean, the more you put on them, the better, because you know what you don't want them to become stagnant. The more we can do with those young men, you know, bringing Chaz off the edge, or I mean, you can be really, really creative with both of them because their knowledge of football is outstanding. And so for us, you know, give them more so they don't get bored of the game, challenging them more, and they'll take to that, you know. So both those young guys, I mean, they love knowledge. They love to write the game down and play it in their minds. So the more we can do, now there's still, you know, it's 9 more guys out on the football field, so it won't be just them. So it's going to be the whole defense as a collective on how much the whole defense can handle.
What makes you a good recruiter? What have you done? What have you learned to become a good recruiter and earn that reputation? And you mentioned cutting bait, and that's kind of where you cut off earlier.
Oh yeah. Just read how you read a room. You know what I mean? You can walk into a room now, and I think that's what I've gotten good at is fact walking into a room, man, and then just looking at the dynamics and, you know, what's the kids? Is he giving you eye contact? Is he leaning towards you? Is his feet moving? You know what I mean? Does his eyes look at that door, which means he wants you to walk out that door? So I got a chance to start studying, you know, body movements and, you know, kids that clam up or walk out the room. You know, there's a lot of things that they can show you in the interest part of it. Then just as far as the communication, you know, in today's game, if they like you, Ross, they gonna keep communicating with you. You know, it's kind of like the dating scene. If I gotta call her and text her every single time when I was single, then you know what? She's reached out to somebody. You know what I mean? So in this game, Ross, if they're communicating back to you and you communicating back to them, and it's both on a mutual deal, I text him, and out the blue, he texts me, "Hey, coach, what's going on?" That kid has legitimate interest. You know, if every time I got to reach out and call and text him, then you know what? He's calling somebody else. You know, he's reaching out to somebody. So that's what I was saying before is even when you start the contact part of it and get a chance to see him in person, if we can get it down to 50-50 Ross, then I think Carolina always have a legitimate shot at getting the kids.
Go ahead, Ross.
Yeah, I can't relate to much of that dating stuff, but in terms of Charlotte, y'all have had great coverage in the state of North Carolina. How has Charlotte you've seen change in the last 2 years of Mac? You're recruiting in Charlotte and landing those kids and kind of really getting more Tar Heel commits from the Queen City.
If you remember, Ross, and this was there used to be there was always the talk, if you control the East, You know, the East. I always heard about who's got the East. You know, and that was down in Jacksonville and that area down there. Everybody was always talking about the East, but it's changed a lot. When I was here in 2005 to 2009, which wasn't very long ago, Ross. If you remember, man, it was only about 4 or 5 players a year, Ross, that were coming out of Charlotte. That's not many at all. And even when I was a player at Carolina, I just don't remember many kids coming out of Charlotte. I mean, I think we had Reggie Clark, and that may have been the only player on our football team from the Queen City. But if you look at it now, and how the dynamics have changed, you know, with Charlotte being one of the fastest growing cities in the country, you know, like 80-something people a day are moving there. A lot of those manufacturing jobs on the East have closed down. A lot of people have moved from the East over to Charlotte. So now you see Charlotte's producing, 20, 25 players a year now that are signing Power 5 scholarships. So that's changed a lot. So the philosophy goes like this: between the Gastonia area and the Charlotte area and the Concord area, you can get, 10, 11 players on your football team from that area. And if you control that area, which is the biggest area in the state, you control that area, you control the messaging. And then that way, if you control Charlotte, you control North Carolina. And if you win the state of North Carolina in recruiting, you'll be in the ACC in championship.
Good, Ross.
Great. That was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tina, we're back to you.
Coach, I'm going to stick with recruiting. You mentioned a little bit on Ross's question. Been recruiting North Carolina for a long time with Auburn and Tennessee, and now your second time with UNC. What have you seen talent-wise change in kids from North Carolina? You guys have got 13 commits from North Carolina this in the class of 21. So what's a little bit different than the last time he was at Chapel Hill?
Just the fact that the recruiting never stops. During the football season, you study offering kids, and we've offered a lot of kids that are, from this class here. We offered a bunch of these kids 2 years ago. As far as the early offering and jumping out early. One thing that they'll hurt you with today is if you don't offer them early, when they're in 10th grade, you're out of it. If they're a good football player, they could easily put you out, and and then word travels so fast. That's kind of the difference now is the word. If you don't offer a kid and he's got an offer from Alabama or Auburn and you hadn't offered him yet, he's communicating to other kids that hey, North Carolina ain't gonna offer you. So the thing that we've done differently here is we've put the early offers out. I think what we've done also different is the fact that we Coach makes it an emphasis to have relationships with all coaches in this state. And we have to talk to every single one of them, regardless if they got a player or not. And so when the player is coming up, we are getting heads up. Hey, here's a kid down the pipeline, and I think he's going to be a good football player. You guys need to offer early. So I think that's one thing we've done that's been a little bit different as far as getting those early offers out and start recruiting those guys a whole lot earlier. As far as the difference between the ACC and the SEC, it's, here I don't hear so much of the SEC when I'm over in North Carolina. Yeah, Tennessee may try to tiptoe over here. Auburn try to tiptoe. But for the most part, only about 1 or 2 players that are actually going to the SEC. I don't hear as much as when I was in the SEC at Tennessee on how much I had to hear about Georgia and Alabama and Auburn. Here, the culture is still ACC.
Good. Gregory Hall, you're up.
Coach, what surprised you about your defense last season?
I tell you what, I thought every week they got better and better, just the progress of them and how comfortable they got. One thing that I did notice, and me and JB talked about this a lot, JB has a great football mind. And because it looks like we do so much on defense, to offense, it paralyzes a lot of offenses. And I think our kids start to feel that, we're only going to see about 10, 11 plays. And then once they master those 10, 11 plays, they became really dominant. I thought at the end of the season, man, we played Temple, we played NC State. I thought we were playing as good a defense as anybody in the country. And I would have loved to play anybody at that time of the season. So, with this corona thing going on now, I hope to God we're able to get back on track and play this season because I think our kids have a whole different type of confidence. And it took us a minute to get there. It was a lot of oh, here we go again. When we lost the game to Clemson, or we lost to a Pittsburgh or Virginia, it was that doubt that, those doubts of, we're going to lose the close game like we did the season before. I think by the end of the season, they found the ways to win the tight games and started to believe that they're a really dominant football team. And that Temple game really showed it, and I thought that NC State game really showed it. And I think that, from here on out, I think our kids now know that they can play with anybody in the country.
Anything to follow up with, Gregory?
Yeah, and what does it need to improve on moving to this next season as the team as a whole tries to become that consistent top 25 program? What does your defense need to improve upon from last season to be at that next level?
Just to make sure that for us, it's never, it's always going to be fits. Make sure you fit plays right and don't give up big plays. We have always said, okay, what do we need to work on? Okay, let's work on this year. Let's make sure we work on the red zone and short yardage. I know those are two emphases, especially by our head coach, that we need to emphasize on. Is when teams get in the red zone, keep them from scoring touchdown and hold them to field goals. That's one thing we can do a whole lot better. And then just making sure that, when you bust, if you bust a play, you got to make sure it's at a minimum game. The fact that we don't let nobody throw the ball over our head or misfit plays. So for us, it's just, again, the consistency of it, being consistent. And I thought last season, that's what we did a great job of. We simplified it, let the kids play what they had their strengths to. And then, you got older. This is an older football team, so of course we can do a lot more on defense. We got experience in the secondary. We got experience at the linebacker position. We got to grow, the defensive line. We got some old guys like Fox and Jaleel Taylors of the world, but we got to keep growing that position.
Good. Andrew Jones, go ahead.
Hey, Coach, aside from not being able to be face-to-face with any of the kids during the shutdown, what's been the biggest challenge in recruiting during this time period? And is there something maybe that you've learned during this process that you might use more once the norm is restored?
The biggest challenge is just not being able to see them. You going from as soon as the spring ball or spring game was over with, was walking into schools and seeing the kids of, especially in the sudden springtime, of kids being able to go out there and practice spring ball. We're fortunate enough this year, we got a lot of players in state. If this was next year, the way it doesn't seem like those numbers as big, it would have been quite a challenge, because now you got to go to other people's state to try to get recruits, and you can't see them. So our biggest asset has been the fact that our state got a lot of football players this year. So for us, it's a lot better. But it's hard to offer those. I'll tell you what's probably the most difficult thing is right now is the 22 class and the 23 class. Of identifying who the young guys are going to be that's going to be up and coming, and then trying to get those guys offered, because you hadn't seen them in person. And you hadn't seen them go through spring ball or go through the weight room or get the chance to grab the transcripts from school. So that's the biggest challenge, is identifying for the 22 and 23 classes. This year class, we already got 14 already committed, and we only got 4 or 5 more scholarships. So we're ahead of the curve in that sense, and it's been really good, because all we got to do now is just keep communicating and keep having a great relationship with their coaches and the people that surrounding them. But we got to get ahead on the 22, 23 class.
Yeah, and the other part, what have you learned maybe that you've used in recruiting the last 6 or 7 weeks? You've been forced to that you might actually take with you. Pardon me?
Right. The one thing you've learned is still about communicating. You still got to have communication. For us, it's easy to fall into your own little trap of, okay, this is what I'm doing every single day. But now you have a chance to actually talk to them a whole lot more than you had in the past. Because you're sitting around, and I can say, hey, give me a call real quick. Like I'm sitting around with some recruits, and okay, one guy that we recruited, he loves to cook. He loves cooking. So, hey, okay, FaceTime me and show me what you're cooking. And then he'll share recipes with me. So there's a lot of different, there's one guy that's his dad's a coach, and he's he's talking football with me. So, as far as the talking and the communication is ramped up a whole lot more than it had been you know, if we were in spring ball or something, you know, of course we had practices and film evaluations. And then if you were out there practicing, you know, if the kids were out there practicing, you'd be watching their practices, coming back to your hotel room at nighttime, trying to catch up on the phone calls. So it's different now because you just got time. And that's you can do two things. You can do nothing, or you can maximize the time with, you know, with recruiting and evaluations and calling, trying to find out who's the 22 kids.
Sammy, you're up. Go ahead.
Yeah, Tommy, I'm from Fayetteville, which produced two of your former teammates, Marcus Wall and Bracy Walker. Two pretty tough guys. In your mind, who was tougher, Novocaine or Super Nat?
Who's the other one?
Marcus Wall and Bracy Walker.
Oh, no, it ain't even close. No, Bracy, man, he goes down as the, you know, one of the all-time great safeties that we've had. I mean, he ended up playing 10, maybe 11 years in the NFL. Yeah. Now, Marcus, pound for pound, you know, man for man, and he was pretty tough, but he didn't never knock himself unconscious. And that's what Bracy would do. Bracy would knock himself senseless, you know, put some water on his head and then go right back out there. So not many come like him. I mean, he is the ultimate warrior, probably one of the all-time toughest football players that ever come through North Carolina, in my opinion.